Hey, it's your financial maven, Samantha M, Besnoff, CPA. And for the last 30 years, yes, 30 years in the accounting world, I absolutely love sharing my insights and passion about money for individuals, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. Knowing your money and hopefully feeling less stressed about your money is what I call being financially empowered. Welcome to the Your Financial Maven podcast. Welcome to the latest episode of Your Financial Maven. I'm excited today to have with me Amy Friesen. I think I said that right, Amy? From Canada, actually. I'm very excited about this. Amy has 20 years of experience in elder care. You are very passionate about helping families to find their voice, gain confidence in the elder care area, whether they're dealing with a parent that's living at home with them or probably having to deal with going to maybe assisted living, nursing home, retirement, things like that. I know in the last 11 years, I believe you created something called Tea and Toast. You have a book out that is called Breadcrumbs from Home to Care Homes. So I definitely want to talk a little bit about that, but I'm very excited to have you on to talk about elder care because I think it's important. There's a lot of financial aspect, even though you're from Canada and Canadians' healthcare system is a little different than us here in the United States. I think there's a lot that Amy can provide us. You are an award-winning entrepreneur, innovator, and a best-selling author. You were named the award winner, recognized as 40 Under 40 recipient in 2019, and you are Businesswoman of the Year in 2018. So, Amy, welcome to Your Financial Maven.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I am too. So before we really get into talking about elder care and those areas, I always ask my guests, what is money?
What is money? It's a tool, in my opinion. It's
Okay.
a tool to do cool stuff with or pay your bills.
Yes. Cool stuff and pay your bills. I love it. Yes. And I think too, the paying the bills part or it's a tool as we're getting into this discussion with you about elder care it's a huge tool, I think, when you're talking about this area for people. I will be 52 this year. My husband and I are both blessed to have both sets of our parents alive still in their 80s. We also have 20-year-olds. So we are the inevitable sandwich, right? My husband will be 55 actually in a few days. So we're kind of in the middle of it all. So I want to first know how you got started with Tea and Toast and really getting into the elder care area. And then once we kind of get to know who you are and how you got started, we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I have been in this industry for 20 years. I started right out of school, right out of psychology, actually.
Nice.
And I had a marketing background as well. And I just didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to know what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Yeah. Do we still know what we want to do I don't even know if I still do.
I feel like that's 20 years later, I'm getting closer. I don't know.
I think so. I've been doing this I've been in the accounting field for 30 years, and there are days I still don't know if I'm doing what I want to do.
I get that.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. And, I started in retirement living and marketing. I did that for, a couple different companies for almost 10 years. I just really found that people were struggling, and it's really interesting looking back that, I was kind of in a bubble, the retirement home bubble. And when you come out to the community, there's all sorts of stuff out here helping families very directly in their timeline, and they're leading the ship that just needs to be addressed. And there's so much confusion around elder care, senior living. And so I really started in the navigation part of retirement living. And then because I am an educator, I use tools that I've learned along the way, and I just have a passion for making sure families get through this. Right. So
Love it.
I just keep adding and adding and adding, whether it's downloads or whether it's courses or whether it's more service or whatnot. And it's just to fill this gaping gap that we have in elder care that's, in the US and Canada, everywhere.
Yeah.
Really, because
Yeah.
I just think people didn't pay enough attention when all of us in the industry were screaming, it's coming.
Right. It's coming. And I think you're right because people are living longer. And, healthcare and other things, other means, learning how to eat healthier and taking care of yourself has become such a big industry that we are living longer, right? I mean, my parents had me when they were 30 and they're 81, 82 almost. So like it's and they're still around. I mean, they moved to Florida. They abandoned the rest of us up on the East Coast, Northeast Coast. They moved to Florida and we've had those questions of now what? We all live up on the Northeast and now they're several hours away. And in that.
Absolutely. And to your point about having your parents having you when they're 30, I had my child when I was 36.
Okay.
And so I feel like just based on my limited knowledge of my friend group and my peers,
Right.
we're all kind of moving that way to later children,
Yeah.
which, as you spoke about, the sandwich generation, we're all kind of aligning in that now. Like all of us are sort of on that track to have even younger children
Yeah.
and our parents still, right? So
Yeah.
I think that there's just so much to talk about. There's so much to navigate in family dynamics alone.
Right, right. And I think you've been an innovator in this area that you've seen what you have seen in the retirement community where you work and going, where are the resources? And I think that is something that we lack in that regards and that you've been able to say, hey, we have to have these conversations. And also for those of us who are kind of stuck in the middle, having the conversations because our parents don't always want to hear it. They don't always want to hear that they're getting older and they might need assistance and everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and when I make our resources too, I try to make them for a global audience because although our systems for healthcare are different depending on where you go, caregiving at its
Yes.
core, all those awkward conversations. I often say, sandwich caregivers are having these awkward conversations with their loved ones in elder care and the birds and the bees sometimes at the same time.
This is very true.
Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
just caught in the middle and nobody wants to be there and nobody wants to do it.
Right. And I think from the financial aspect, it's not about so much how much money you might have to spend for elder care assisted living. I think that's a huge part. But I also think it's that idea of, I am one of three. I'm the youngest. I have an older sister and an older brother. And my father, who's been in the insurance business for decades, turned to me and said, well, you're the accountant, you're in business. I want you to be the executor. Like, I want you to handle everything. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm still going to have my sister and brother help me, but like he gave me access to everything. And when they moved permanently to Florida, I was like, well, now we have to have another conversation. And having that conversation with my father isn't really a problem. It's my mom who's just never wants to hear it, doesn't want to deal with it because she doesn't want to deal with what the inevitable is. And I think, right, that's part of it.
People shut down and people literally think
Yeah.
if you talk about death, you will die.
Yeah.
Right. And it's,
Right.
and the elder care conversations are just so much more than what do you want to do when you die?
Right.
Right? What
Right.
about all that living space? And
Right.
to that point too, we ask people all the time, do you have your legal documents order? Wills,
Yeah.
POAs, a lot of people don't. And then a lot of people are like, oh, I have my will done. I'm like, no offense, but I don't care about your will. I
Right.
need your POAs because
Right.
I don't need them, but I need you to have them because the thing is that as soon as something happens that you can't make decisions, we're up the creek, right?
You're right, and that is, I realized when my parents were moving, I had to get a new POA because now they live in Florida. They don't live in, where they lived before. They live in another state. And so, when I went down to visit the last time, I'm like, okay, we're printing this out and let's go. And, getting my mother to sign it, I'm like, I have to have everything in order. And also as an accountant, from my standpoint, from a financial standpoint, I want it so I can get the tax returns, which is a whole nother POA separate from the legality of the stuff. There is a POA that you can get to help get transcripts and talk to the IRS. And if you have to talk to the state, like financially, that can affect you on how you deal with elder care.
There's also, here we also have tax benefits, right? We have
Yeah.
disability tax credit and things like that. And
Love
so
it.
if you're not informed, like you just can't get them. We didn't know my father-in-law would be eligible until
Okay.
like way later. And then you start reading into it, and you're like, oh wait, you are eligible, right? And
Yeah.
so I also try to really empower caregivers to know that, it's amazing if you want to be involved and you want to help and you want to do all that. But there's also this line that if your loved one won't talk about it and they just want you to make decisions or whatever that looks like, one, you're allowed to say, like, I need this to execute this. I need that.
Right.
Because I was going to say the other side of that is, like, you can make the decisions, but most people aren't comfortable making decisions without conversations. But
Right.
sometimes people just won't have those conversations. My mom, when I asked her about doing pre-funeral planning, literally just told me to go find a very specific undertaker and he would take care of it. I'm like, that's just not the conversation.
Right. Right. And I think you bring up a valuable point. I think women do outlive men. Sorry, men. But, women are outliving men. And I think the other issue with that is when the spouse or partner passes away and now you have someone who's elder, who's a woman, or older, a lot of women from a financial aspect have no clue. They don't know where the will is or the tax documents are or how to get connected to the banks. Because I know here in the United States, it can be very difficult, even if your name is on that bank account. But if the primary was your spouse, like how you manage that and how you navigate that. And I think that's a huge issue as part of this planning too, on knowing what you need to do, a guide on kind of what you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, finding the information after somebody passes away, let alone just like even in hospital. My dad was in hospital a year back and he was fine at the end, but even just operating his house, like mom and dad are still alive. They live together. We couldn't get any information out of mom. And so I created what I call a home SOP, right? Where
Yeah.
is everything? Write it
Yes.
down. Because
Yeah.
we couldn't even find the modem, right?
Right.
Like, not
Right.
hold anything else, but like, it
Right,
was
but
just
that can
wild.
affect having to pay bills
Yeah.
and making sure things are going through right. I mean, I know, like, I have a copy of all my dad's passwords to get into his computer because my mother, while she has her stuff, again, it's just not in her wheelhouse. And we're trying to collect that database, my husband and I, for both sets of parents, because we know we're going to have to go in there and like figure this all out. And it's interesting. My in-laws, about 5 years ago, they sold the house that they lived in and they wanted first floor living. So we were like, okay, great. Retirement community, assisted living. No, they went into a 55 and over retirement. And they're in mid to late 80s. And while we don't agree with it, we understand why they did it, but it's an extra step that here I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, if you are older and you're not living in one of the retirement communities and something happens and you need a bed, it's harder to get a bed than if you're living there. And I'm sure you see that in Canada about that. That's planning too, from both financial and living
Mhm.
aspect.
When we're fortunate enough to get relatively independent clientele, I mean, and I say fortunate
Yeah.
because a lot of people come to us in crisis because they don't want to plan,
Right.
and we'll dig them out, right? And we'll do our best. But to your point is if people are thinking about it when they're more independent without all the care services and can move in to the independent section of a retirement living,
Right.
they move internally. And so
Yeah.
because our healthcare system, our long-term care and our retirement is all backed up. And so
Nice.
getting into care right now is very, very tricky. And so
Yeah.
you have to really plan that. But, and to your point of, about moving to the 55 plus, I guess it is, we have that conversation when we're doing our elder care plans because the thought of it is you will have to move again unless you're going to bring in care. And depending on what their background is, depending on what they need for care, if they have Parkinson's or anything like that, that's not, it's
Yeah.
a
Very
progressive
true.
thing.
Yeah.
We empower our people to actually think about all the facts and say, is this a good move? Because we have people all the time that want to move into an apartment or a condo in the same age. And we say, there's also the similar living that are actually attached to retirement living. And
Yeah.
so what's the best case? Because, are you going to be there a year? Are you going to be there more? What happens if something happens to you? Can you break the lease? Can you do all this
Right.
extra stuff?
Right. There's all that. Right. That's a very good point too. Like not realizing, if you take on a mortgage and now something happens and now you've got to try to sell the house and there could be tax consequences with that. There could be cash flow situation with that. It is really, it is interesting. It is an emotionally charged, item, thing in life, right? This planning and having to do more of that. So do you, doing working for others and now working for yourself, kind of that leadership, where do you see the industry now and where it's going? And are there things that people really need to be paying attention to, and kind of what you're bringing to that and how you can help people?
In my opinion, I kind of feel like the government system for like, because they control our long-term care and the
Okay.
government subsidize home care and the retirement industries have really made the terminology and things really difficult to get their heads around. I mean,
Okay.
one of the base things we do for everybody is get them up to par on terminology, because who knows
Interesting.
what a one person assist is if you're not dealing with it, right? And
Right.
so I just find that the industries are much more complicated than need be. And even before, when I was doing research for my book to see like what else is out there, I found a couple of things, but there's such limited information, which is why I just, plow it out to the community. Because if I can create something, one of my team members will be like, do we have a blog on this? It's like, no, but I'll write it to you and I'll get it to you in a week, right?
Right.
Because people need the information and they don't know how to grab it. Whereas if you work with an elder care planner or someone that's experienced in this industry, if we don't have it, we know where to get it, or we know
Right.
who to ask, right? And so
Right.
I do feel like there's going to be, because there's more baby boomers coming through the system, there's more after COVID people that didn't move. Everything is compounding. And so availability is really down in senior living. And so that means that the next best option is home care, which is a great option, but it still needs to be planned. There's still budgets and all that. And so really, I feel like there's this really big influx. It's already here, but it's coming full force, which means also that all our caregivers are going to be more burnt out, and just trying to keep their head above water but as you can expect, that's just a ripple effect.
Yeah, and I think there's trauma in there and how you deal with stuff. I mean, my grandmother, my mom's mom, my nanny, moved in with us when I was 6 months old. My grandfather, my mom's dad, passed away when I was 8 days old, and my grandmother moved in when she was in her late 50s, early 60s. She lived till she was 99, and she
Hmm.
lived with my parents up until 3 months before she passed.
Wow.
And she was very feisty, very independent, lived on the first floor of the 55 and over townhouse that my parents had lived in. My parents spent like 11 years on the second floor because she had the whole like the master suite.
I love
But
it.
it was interesting that the last 2 years of her life, to see, my parents didn't see it because they're so into it, right? When you are so involved in that with the elder care, they're so involved with her. They didn't realize how bad the situation was until they had gone away for a couple weeks. And my sister, brother, and I had to step in and like say, okay, like, we need to help you take care of this. And it was just interesting from my perspective to see how they handled it in their 70s, dealing with my grandmother in her late 90s, like dealing with that every day, and that stress on them. So you're right, the stress, I've seen it already personally, but I do think that the stress for those of us in my age group, Gen X timeframe, are going to see more of it because of not having those resources. And I find it interesting, this area is so niche, right? The elder care area. And you as an entrepreneur, like, how did you determine you wanted to be so niche in that? And also doing that, how can you help other entrepreneurs when they decide to get into a niche business? Like, what are the steps and things you've done to be able to provide this innovative way of helping people with elder care, but not just elder care, but just niching into that area?
I really didn't realize it until later after I did it, but I love to be first to market. I'm a bit of a
Okay.
unicorn,
I
which
love that.
is plus and minus, right? Because everything I do, to your point, is new and
Yeah.
it's painful, like contracts, accounting, all of this stuff
Yeah.
that business owners that in businesses in industries that just have been running are like, it's kind of boilerplate, some of the stuff, and not for us, like everything, right? And so I didn't really understand that when I was jumping into it. I just saw a need and I was like, you know what, I can fill this need. And then as I went through it and I started bringing on more and more families, I was like, this is way bigger than I
Right.
expected.
You didn't realize the resources weren't there.
That's right. And so, and as a marketer, you're kind of sheltered in the retirement home. Like you're not really looking for it.
Right.
You're in a specific job, right?
Right.
And so there's just so much room in this area. And that's why I love it, because being a thought leader, I'm able to grow it and get those resources out. And it's so interesting to me when I got contacted from somebody in Pennsylvania the other day and said, I'm looking at your coaching. I'm looking to do this. My friend that owns a company like yours in Washington, saw your Instagram, and I was like, oh, I was like, this is
Wow.
cool,
Yeah,
right? People
yeah.
are watching, people are listening and intaking it, which is really interesting to me because it's just, you just never know, right? And so I think that really just finding the need that you're passionate about and going full bore into it and really just trying to um, carve the niche out, really,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
carve the category. And so we're looking at lots of different opportunities now just to keep moving forward and expand this industry.
Yeah, and I think it's great, and also, you're a best-selling author, your breadcrumbs book. I mean, is it a guide? And like you said, you're trying to make it more, across the board and not just, Canadian specific. But are there things when you were thinking about putting this together, like how did you determine, especially since you're in such a niche area, what was so important? Like I've been trying for the last couple of years to put some things together for small business owners on structure, on the things like the accounting and some of the legal contracts and things like that. And I get started and then it gets too big, right? Like the ideas grow. So how did you get started with that guide? What do you find that does for others? And kind of how did you keep it that specific?
This is a second edition,
Okay.
and the first edition I did, which you can probably see behind me, is
I
the
see.
blue
Yeah.
book. The first edition I did, I always call it staying in my lane. Like I'm very aware of what I'm good at. And so it was very targeted to retirement navigation and a little bit of here and there of different information. And then, 3 years passed and then I grew up and I was like, this is like, I could do this better.
Right.
But I really like the title. So I was like, let's do second edition. So this is the second edition. So I aim at the caregivers because
Okay.
what is the neutral zone that everybody kind of can connect to? It's not elder care. It's, it's really very much like who is in the caregiver roles that
Interesting.
that can take the information, and it's in line with other things that I produce, right? So that I can meet people where they are. And if someone's not ready to have a conversation about it, then they can just read the book on their
Yeah.
own time
Yeah.
without me knowing, right?
Right, right.
And so I'm always so delighted again when people find it and they're like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." So it's very humbling. And so in this book, I really aim at the caregivers. I talk about the senior industry, but I really wanted it to be broader than Ontario, Canada.
Right, right,
And because medical systems are complicated, there's a touch on there with like a little bit like of a caveat before just saying, this is tailored a little bit, but it's
right.
broad. It's the best you can do, right? And so it talks
Absolutely.
about how to have the talks of elder care. It talks about like the roles changing between yourself and your parent, and how you're now kind of parenting the parent and what that looks like. And it even talks about the fact that we just don't have enough generational information and knowledge because we haven't been through it. We've only had long-term care, nursing homes, skilled nursing, depending on where we are.
And I think nursing homes and care have, to a degree, changed since I remember what they were like as a kid when my
It's
father's mom
changed.
was in one,
Yeah.
for years, and just I'm not saying that there aren't still issues, but the idea, like you said, of the whole family, right? Like, similar to when, you get pregnant and you're ready to have that baby, the father's in the room, other people are involved now. It's more holistic or whole than it is just like leaving it up to the person that has to deal with it. Like there's all these connections. And it's interesting, with the caregivers, I think, I'm sure you not create, but you deal with some challenges with the caregivers themselves. I think from a financial aspect, again, not everybody cares to or wants to pay attention to the financial literacy of things, the financial understanding of things. What are the challenges that you find when you're working with the caregivers, not just from the whole elder care thing, but something specific, especially with the legal and the money side of it? Like, what are some of the things that you see?
There's a lot of caregivers that have to put money in now. There's a lot of people that have no pensions. There's a lot of people that were lower income, and there's not a good way to solve it, which is unfortunate, right? Like in my own area, the long-term care list could be 5 years long, and that's after
Wow.
you need the care. And
Wow.
so home care is going to be just as expensive.
Yeah.
So either they're pitching in for cost wise, or they're bringing them into their own home and now they're going to be full blown caregivers, and then their job suffers and they have to take
Right.
leave. Lots of people are burnt out. And lots of people don't know how to do the self-care part of it. And so they're not keeping up. They didn't build the habits. They didn't build the flex before. And
Right.
so they're just treading water. But honestly, they're treading water for years
Yeah.
sometimes. And it's really hard. And then I just have the other caregivers that are starting to amplify an amount where they have really problematic relationships with their
I was
families.
just going to say there's that issue of it as well.
Yeah. And some of them either aren't speaking to siblings, they're not talking to parents, they're estranged, or they're just really difficult. And then I have the caregivers that are like, do I go in and care for them? I have
Right.
stepped back for my own mental health. What do I do? And so I do a lot of speaking towards that as well, because it's just such a dynamic area and it's something nobody talks about. Again, kind of one of those first to market things, right? Nobody's
Right.
talking
Right.
about it.
Yeah, but you bring up a good point that the self-care not only in the industry that you're working with, right? The elder care piece of the caregivers, but also for you as a business person and really for anybody out there in business, being able to balance the self-care aspect of it with working with others to help them balance self-care and help who they need to help. So what are some tips or tricks or things that you either give to your clients, your caregivers as ideas, or that you do yourself for self care that, you know, are important to have?
Well, on that self-care is compassion fatigue, right? Like people that work in this sector, for instance, we have to take care of ourselves because we get involved with our clients and we have that compassion fatigue on top of burnout of just everyday life because
Yeah.
everybody everywhere is burnt out, right? Like
Yes.
nobody,
Yes, we are. Yes, we
right?
are.
And
Yes.
so I found techniques myself. I do something called tapping. I don't know if you've heard. And so
No, I haven't.
it's like reflexology points on
Okay.
your face and collarbone and arm. And so I do that, and it's a stress reduction, right? And so I had to teach myself to do that for a long enough time that I could actually see it because
Yeah.
everybody wants a quick fix to everything, right? Including myself. And
Right. Don't we
so
all? Don't we all?
yeah. So I've gotten through that piece. But also I love like going out in my little camper by myself. Like,
I
don't
need
talk
time
to
to
me.
myself.
Don't
Right.
come with me. I'm good. Right. And so, but I teach caregivers. I teach caregivers that, but I also teach them how to set boundaries properly.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Right. Not just for your caregivers, but I think for everybody, we
Yeah.
need to have boundaries.
Yeah. Some of us don't even know, like, they don't know what that means, right? It's
Right.
like a lot of people hear boundaries, but it's like, what does that mean in practice? Which is especially useful for our caregivers that are estranged or difficult relationships, because I talk about safe caregiving. And
Yeah.
so, how do you do safe caregiving? If you want to be involved, one of the ways is to set up very appropriate and everybody knows
Right.
boundaries, or
Right.
you don't walk back in,
Yeah.
right? Like there's very specific things to do because you have to protect yourself
Absolutely.
regardless. I'm a a big believer, obviously, that we only really have one life. Nobody knows what happens next. So it's like if this is your one life,
Right.
do you want to spend 30 years caregiving? Do you want to do all
Right.
these things? And so lots of people are very much about yes, absolutely, I'll care for them. They have great relationships. That's amazing. A
But
lot of other
even with
people.
those great relationships, there's still fatigue. There's still,
That's it.
and either with that in business in general, you're an entrepreneur and innovator and it's there. I mean, I do set boundaries during tax season. They're not as strict. I mean, 2 o'clock in the morning, no matter whether it's tax season or not, I'm not answering a client. Sorry. Like it's just, you want to send me an email at 2 o'clock in the morning by all means. But for me, it's that shift too, right? That I set boundaries during one part of the year and I have to shift those boundaries to another part of the year because I don't work on the weekends when it's not tax season. I don't want to answer my emails, but with caregiving, it could be a 24/7. So I think that is something that even, like you said, even with having to do that, boundaries are okay. We shouldn't feel guilty about that. We shouldn't have shame about that. It's okay to set our boundaries, whether it's for personal self care in our financial world, in our caregiving world, whatever it is. I think boundaries are very important. So I do agree with you that we need to set them and it's okay to change them and adjust them, but
Absolutely.
It's
And I
definitely got to be
usually
there.
teach my caregivers as well that, you have to learn how to dance with guilt, right?
Yes.
You're going to feel guilty no matter what you do. All of us have it. If
Very
people have
true.
trauma, they're going to be triggered differently and more often.
Yes.
We're all complicated human beings, right? And so whether you set a boundary or you don't, you're going to have guilt on both sides. You just have to know it's going to be there
Right.
and
Right.
not
I
get
agree with
buried
you on
by it.
that. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's important. I think that in what you do also is just to me, I guess I'm just so impressed and amazed by it because I think we need to have that. And I think being able to have those resources. And is there anything as you were, becoming more involved in wanting to do the business for yourself and creating Tea and Toast, is there anything that, you found you yourself had to grow or have a challenge with to kind of get past that point? Like you, I've been in business almost 12 years. It took the first few years to really kind of get over that hump and, grind and everything. And there still is a grind. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't like you get to a point and all, but is there anything that you feel you'd like to share as a business owner that you had as a challenge that now you look at it and go, all right, that challenge is done and I'm moving on to the next one kind of a thing?
I had a big challenge with talking to people.
Oh,
I had a big challenge.
interesting. And here
It's
you are on
interesting.
a podcast. I love it.
It's interesting. One of my friends has told me, when we go into networking events, you literally light up. People are attracted because
Wow.
I have my personality is,
Yeah.
whatnot, but I'm very, very introverted. And
Interesting.
so I had to really understand, okay, I can do this. I can go out, I can talk to people, but it's going to take me like 2 days to recover, depending on what the event is. Right. So we had
Right.
like our anniversary party last year for our 10th year. And it was fabulous. And I was great in the space. It was fine. I kept my speeches minimal. Like I'm not generally a spotlight person. So
Right.
it was fine. I was exhausted. I
Yeah,
literally
I'm
put
sure.
nothing on my schedule the next day. And I just had to learn how to honor that. And it's like, if you want to go big, you got to like also just like take 5 the next time. Right. So,
Yeah.
that was difficult because you want to keep playing full, but
Yeah.
then, being introverted and honestly, the pandemic made me more introverted.
Interesting.
I have to kind of force myself out of my bubbles, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
great on doing stuff like this. I'm talking to you and one-on-one's great. And it's not, these types of things aren't small talk, they're conversations, whereas
Yeah.
small talk really gets me. Like I just
Right.
don't
How's
have
the
a lot of
weather?
time for it.
How's the
I
weather?
don't have a lot of use for it generally. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think you're right. I think as a business owner in this space, and especially in the space that you're at, dealing with elder care and the caregivers and what that all means, because that's a whole lot of stress and pressure in that in and of itself, is learning that and working through that and trying to find, I'm sure you've come across things where if it doesn't work, I've tried it, it just doesn't fit my mojo or my mission. It's okay to shift. So have you found yourself shifting through this process as well?
Well, it's the same thing I tell my daughter with food. Just try it once and then you actually know, right? And it's like, so, we started very heavily because of where the industry developed here, very much in retirement navigation and search. And so we were super heavy and we're still very heavy. But then I saw the needs and now we went into planning, we went into long-term care consulting, we went into all these different avenues. I've developed amyfriesen.com. I'm into speaking and all these things
I
because
love it.
I'm trying to get this message out. And so, really, that's where our shift has been is like we were playing small when we started,
Right.
feeling it out because we're one of the first in Canada. I mean, the States have a lot more elder care planners or senior living advisors, but Canada, it's really hard to find us. And so, um, I really just started small and then I just saw the need, which is the same way. Same reason I developed Elder Care Planners of Canada, which is a bunch of small businesses like me
Right.
kind of team together so we can play bigger.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Yes. In the United States, I know like locally, some of the retirement communities are now really getting into people's homes, you could do home care instead of coming into, living in our facility. And then, of course, having the beds available. But it feels still disconnected to me. And maybe I haven't fully gotten into it that there's little, these pockets of retirement communities and they each do a little thing different. And so there's not somebody necessarily that's general than like what you do that is like the overall aspect. Is there anything else, any misconceptions or anything that you want to get out regarding elder care that caregivers should be aware of when it comes time to having these conversations in the space?
I think that a lot of caregivers, because everybody is so busy, just feel like it's an equal if they plan now or they react in a crisis, for instance, and like, I'll deal with it when it happens scenario.
Yeah,
Really, what I like to tell people is that, the other side of the coin is not equal or better. It's actually way, way worse.
right,
Right. And so,
right,
as a planner, right, like you could literally start early and you could plan for years, months or weeks or whatever that is, however long you have. But if you don't, and the coin flips and there's a crisis, your loved one's in a crisis, which means you're in a crisis. And if they're in hospital or if they need something right away, you're often doing all of that planning in like 2 weeks.
right. And on fire, right? Like quick,
On fire.
right?
Yes.
I think what is this saying? It's better to uh like I don't know the saying, something about being ahead of the fire than trying to put it out, right? That it's
It
better to be
spreads.
prepared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it spreads too fast. And like everybody's in crisis as opposed to nobody being in crisis. Like just think of, what that is like for thought processes and exhaustions and stress levels and your body's reacting and everything's shut down. It's a mess.
And you might make a financial decision or a legal decision that is incorrect because you're trying to put that fire out.
Yep.
And that can be a big issue, especially from the money side of it, because if you are putting out that fire and everything's coming at you fast and you make a mistake with that, there might not be a way to come back from that aspect of how do you deal with elder care and what your services or needs are in that moment.
Absolutely. And when you're dealing with housing, and,
Yeah,
finance is dealing with housing as well. But when you're looking at housing, sometimes the mentality from hospital is like, we'll just send them out to do a respite stay, which is a short stay, and then they can figure it out, get them out of hospital, which I understand.
right,
But as a planner, I can do it in one fell swoop. And the problem is the other way, they don't necessarily look at the patient holistically. They look at the patient, but they don't consider the world that the patient lives in, dogs,
right,
spouses, kids, anything. And I've seen more often than not, unfortunately, folks who have dementia and the hospital needs a bed and they go and they put them into respite care or whatever, and then they have to move to another one because it wasn't appropriate.
right.
Every single move counts, right? And it really just messes up the cognitive so much worse. And so we can do it in the same amount of time, for instance, but like you have to call us, right? And we can
Yeah,
organize it and be done one foul swoop, very, very organized and educated. Because the thing is that I want families to make confident and educated decisions.
absolutely.
I don't want them being
Absolutely.
fired like that.
Right. I agree. I agree. I think that was great. So on the other side of it, as the business owner, is there anything else you'd like to share as an entrepreneur, business owner that could help others when they're starting out or even in their business? Any kind of tips or tricks that have helped you along the way to do what you do?
My own personal slogan is "Do it screaming."
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
all that stuff that you don't want to do that you need to have done. I mean, people talk about eat the frog, like whatnot, do the tough things first. I just do it screaming, right? It's just like get it on a list and mark that thing off as you go, right? Because being an entrepreneur, your business is your baby. You may have children, you may have a spouse, you may have family, whatever.
Right.
Everything is competing against each other. And so if you don't get it done, you don't make any money, right?
Right.
You
Right.
don't progress your business. You can't help more people because your business isn't progressing.
Right.
And so, if your goal, for instance, was to really help people, whether it's caregivers or whatnot, whoever,
Right.
but
Right.
say for caregivers, is my goal is to help people. If you don't show up, they aren't getting help and they can't find you. So
Right.
show up big and bold and
Right.
get it out there and do it screaming.
Right. I agree. And give yourself grace in the process too. That is definitely huge. This has been great, Amy. I appreciate you sharing about the elder care system and for caregivers. Like you said, yes, you're in Canada, but there's a lot of things that I think between Canada and the United States, a lot that we're all dealing with. Where can people find you?
Absolutely. All of our resources are at teaandtoast.ca. You can find links out to anything else I've spoken about, the books there, all the resources are there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I really appreciate it. Is there any last minute thing you'd like to share about whether what you do for the elder care arena or as a business owner?
I think your first instinct was right. What do I need to share? And my need to share are caregivers that you're not alone. You're just not. Open up the conversation because so many people are in that bucket and the bucket's getting fuller every single day. And
It is.
so I think people just really feel like they're doing it alone. And from what I can tell professionally, not even close.
Yeah, I agree. And now you've given me a lot to think about. I'm actually heading to see my parents in a week or two. They're going on a trip. We're dog sitting, but I'm still going to see them before they leave. So a lot to really think about. So Amy, thank you so much for joining me here on Your Financial Maven.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Follow, like, and subscribe to Your Financial Maven wherever you listen to your podcasts. And make sure that you leave your money stories or questions for me at www.yourfinancialmavenpodcast.com. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about money. The purpose of this podcast is to provide general information on the subjects discussed. It is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It is not meant to resolve your specific financial needs or situations. Please consult with your CPA, tax, or financial professionals.
Your Financial Maven is hosted and produced by Samantha M. Besnoff, CPA, and Your Financial Maven, LLC. Editing is done by Kris Zarnoch of KMZen Creative. Music is written, composed, and performed by Daniel Shore.